HanselMinutes.com. It's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman, hosted by Carl Franklin. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 149, recorded live Tuesday, February 10th, 2009. Support for Hansel Minutes is provided by Telerik RAD Controls, the most comprehensive suite of components for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.telerik.com. And by .NET Developers Journal, the world's leading .NET developer magazine. Online at www.sys-con.com. In this episode, Scott talks to Doug Cook, Hal Seville, and Lee Brenner about their new Twitter client, Blue.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today we're sitting down with the guys from 1323. It's a development and design firm. I got Doug Cook, Hal Seville, and Lee Brenner. Can you guys tell me who does what?
Well, this is Doug Cook. I'm an experienced architect. And like a lot of people, we have a small team here. We have fairly diverse backgrounds, but my background is in UI design and development.
Okay. Hal?
My name is Hal Seville. I am a designer, UI designer, and that's my primary hat.
Okay. And Lee?
I am a developer. I do all of the hardcore WPF stuff as well as a lot of the animation and user experience. Okay.
So I wanted to talk to you guys because you've got some experiences, you call them, demos, samples, experiences up at 1323.com, the word 13 and the number 23.com. And one of them really kind of took Twitter by storm a couple weeks ago. It used to be called Chirp, and you've had a little name conflict, and you've renamed it Blue, B-L-U. And it's a WPF Twitter client, and there's been some clients before. There's the Witty, W-I-T-T-Y. That's an open source WPF client. But this is the first exceedingly pretty one. I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's got a really cool color scheme. It's got a real interesting aesthetic. It's not the standard developer kind of 1970s orange shag carpet avocado colored refrigerator style. It's pretty amazing. Why did you make a Twitter client?
I guess I'll just start with that. We do these labs, and they pretty much start out as ideas with one person, and then the labs that you see on the site end up when everyone has buy-in, and it's like, yeah, go, and then those are the labs you see on the site. I started just like, getting on Twitter because a buddy was like, hey, check this out, Twitter. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of not great, I'm not interested in that. And then, I started seeing some people post some things. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. So I created an account, and very modest. But then I was like, okay, let's check out a desktop client. And then I was noticing a lot of them were terrible. I mean, not only just from a visual standpoint, but from an interaction standpoint. I'm like, where's the update button? Where's this? Oh my God, there's too many buttons on this one, So it was like, just kind of like trying to come up with something that was in between, but also I did not mind having on my desktop and wasn't green. I just kind of toyed around with it, and then, that's how that started.
And this is just an experiment, and you guys put it out there?
Yeah, I think.
Did you think it was going to take off? Is this going to be a?
I think the main thing to understand about the labs is they're primarily design experiments. So most of them tend to be our excursions in the technology, and then also just kind of practicing internally within a core team, kind of honing out our own process. So. A lot of times we'll launch these not expecting them to be full-fledged, applications. They're more sort of excursions in, how can we create a nice experience around a set of, a small set of services. So Twitter seemed to be kind of a nice model system because it's not very complex. It seemed like there would be a lot we could maybe do to raise the bar there. So, when we first launched, we were actually a little surprised that people kind of got into it, and we're pretty excited about it because we really had left out kind of some core functionality. But this was mainly just because the focus was just kind of get a simple client out there, and it's a little bit of a calling card for the company.
Yeah, it seems like desktop versions of popular web applications seem to be the last great thing. I mean, we've got Word and Excel and Outlook and a browser. Really, all that's left to write are really great front ends to things like Twitter. I noticed you guys also wrote an application that front ends Netflix.
Yeah, definitely. So we have another application called Drama that's based on open APIs as well. In the past, we've also done things, as you mentioned, for Flickr photo browsing. And then also one time we had Denounce, sort of a podcast reader. All these are kind of based on the premise that, the web is a great conduit for information, but not always the best experience in terms of accessing that content or experiencing that content.
Yeah. Now, folks won't be able to see this, of course, because we're on a podcast, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. Blue kind of, when you start it up, from a design perspective, it kind of smacks you in the face. It unfolds out of a thin line with a transparent window, and then kind of rolls down with a bit of an arrow, then goes from kind of transparent to slightly translucent, and then it has a very kind of irregular region. It's got a really dramatic representation of the Twitter, what is it, a Twitter pigeon or Twitter bluebird?
Yeah,
it's kind of your view of what this bird would look like. How in the world did you do that startup? I mean, it doesn't just pop a window up and say, "Hey, log in." It kind of unfurls itself in a very dramatic way, and I'm trying to figure out, is this a transparent movie or what? I mean, even if you try Blue and don't like it and end up using a different Twitter client, it's worth installing just to see the startup and shutdown animations. And I cannot get my head around how you did this in WPF.
Well, before we get into the actual how we built it, but to address the more concept behind it is just the desire to try to do something different. That's the point of a lab, because it's like they're for us, and we float them on the website, and Blue was an experiment to see how far we could push it. It's like I did when I was talking to these guys. I was like, why do we just have to have a window open like that? Every window that I've ever had on my desktop does that. Why can't it animate on? But then here's the other trick: why can't I have it animate off? As well. So we kind of pushed it. It's a little over the top, but it's fun. No one does it, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's over the top in the sense that it's well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's over the top. I mean, I guess if every single window did that, it's over the top. When we moved from Windows 98 to XP, and they started to have that little animation when you minimized, and then on the Mac they've got the genie animation. A lot of people thought, oh, this is a waste of power, but it does let you know that something's happening. It does express an interaction, right. And it's a punctuation on an interaction. So I don't think it's necessarily just eye candy.
Yeah, one of the key tenets that we were trying to shoot for with Blue was to have no rough edges in the experience. And what I mean by that is we didn't want the user to have some hard transition at any point, whether that be in the UI or even in the Twitter data that's coming in from the service. So everything smoothly blends from one moment to another. If that means, switching timelines, you'll see the timeline smoothly, slide in and out. Or if a new Twitter comes in or a new tweet comes in, all of the other tweets sort of nicely move down in a natural motion to make room for the new one. And that same tenet goes for the startup and the shutdown. We didn't want it to be a hard stop. We wanted things to come in and out so that everything was very contextual, so that the user always knew, sort of inherently knew what was going on without being, based on visual feedback.
Some of the animations are a little subtle. I mean, they're almost subconscious. For example, one of the things I like about your reply animation is when you click on somebody's name, like right here, I'm looking at a tweet from Tim O'Reilly. I hover over it and I see the buttons fade in and I see reply and retweet. I click reply. Tim O'Reilly flips over, and then my face shows up with a little bubble as if I'm a comic book character, and there's a nice transparent number in the background, kind of as a watermark indicating how many characters I have left. But what's significant to me here is that when I hit reply, it doesn't just flip over. My window, my new reply window, kind of swells for a moment. It just kind of gets a little wider and then gets smaller. It's almost like what you'd see in classic, kind of 60s animation, like Bugs Bunny type animation. I mean, somebody cared about this, not to quote Silence of the Lambs too much here, but somebody loved this. Somebody cared about this. There's idle animations when the little bluebird just decides it's time to, flap its wings.
Yeah, we really didn't want to leave any stone unturned in the experience. There's every moment that you're in the app, we wanted it just kind of surprise you a little bit. And to do that, you really have to think about what you're appealing to at a human level. Humans respond to things emotionally ultimately. So if you can make the application behave naturally with natural physical motion, with small random moments, it just makes it that much more interesting to interact with. And it's almost like a gentle, it's like a gentle presence rather than this hard, computer generated application.
Yeah,
I like that, a gentle presence.
I think another thing to point out that's kind of interesting is an attempt to kind of get away from traditional UI paradigms. Like when things are loading in the application, we run kind of a streamer around the edge and then it flashes instead of just putting up a hard sort of, a lot of people kind of put up like a rotating wheel when things are happening. I just think there's a lot of opportunity to, try to do things that are a little more, a little more organic within terms of the overall experience that match with kind of the application.
Mm-hmm.
It was important for us to surface the idea of content rather than a UI. We really only wanted to surface a user interface if it was absolutely necessary. For the most part, the user should be interacting with content. So rather than surfacing a progress bar to indicate a working state, we just build that into the UI itself, so that it's not, it's like the smooth experience that the user has, and it's all sort of natural and inherent in the UI itself.
Yeah. Well, I want to understand some of the technical stuff. I mean, we can definitely talk about how pretty it is, and I can gush about it, but I want to understand how this was done, how the work was partitioned, who did what, and if you feel that that's a typical developer designer workflow, or are you all designers? Because Microsoft has this idea of what they call the diviner. I'm not a huge fan of the name, but developer and designer in one. And I don't really believe that those people exist. So I'm interested in your opinion about that and how you guys break work up on an application like this that clearly has a lot of work going on in the background, but is pretty as well.
Well, I think we're a small team. And we're all pretty skilled at what we do. So I don't think that we fall into the traditional roles just because we are so specialized and good at what we do. But I think for our typical workflow, there's still a big focus, a big rapport between the designer and the developer, because we sort of overlap hats. Whereas the designer definitely provides a lot of the initial design and a lot of the initial assets, and then hands them off to me to do the development. At the same time, I'm making suggestions to that design, adding in my own touch with code-based animation and the custom layout engine to add physics and direct manipulation and things like that. So it's a very fluid process, and everyone ends up contributing to the process. So it's kind of hard to say that, everything is sectioned off into nice silos, and it's hard to also admit that, we have diviners, because at the end of the day, it actually doesn't work out that way for us personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to understand if your workflow works in the kind of the way Microsoft thinks it's supposed to work. Like, a XAML file gets handed to someone and it's got all kind of pretty design time code and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's much to be made of, like, how Microsoft positions its new design tools and the expression suite, and decide, design time versus runtime, and then the idea that you can have designers working in Blend and, at the same time have developers pulling things up in Visual Studio. And while I think that there definitely are some synergies, we'll rely on Blend in some cases to generate, complex XAML gradients and what have you, but by and large, it just seems like at the end of the day, a lot of the integration still falls on the developer. So a big part of, I think, our process anyway is not only having multiple people looking at the code and looking at the build, but then also having developers that can kind of understand the aesthetic that you're aiming at.
Do you guys have the designer make XAML, or does he make a Photoshop thing, or does he write the thing in Flash first? I mean, how do you get a concept across?
Well, okay, I was floating designs to the guys when we were just kind of developing it, just kind of brainstorming it, and they were like, oh yeah, this is cool, the bird's cool and everything. But I think it really kind of took off from a concept standpoint and got complete buy-in is when I actually kind of animated it and seeing it the way that you see it, like in the actual application. I kind of said, no, this is how it really should behave and open up and everything. And then it's like, once I floated that movie out to the guys, it was like, let's do it. So this one didn't start as static. It had to move, and then that's when everyone got excited, and that's when we started to, Lee started firing up the code. And
what did you show them? You showed them something in Expression or what?
Yeah, I showed them like just a QuickTime movie. It was a little unrefined, but it showed the direction. So that was important, and then there it was,
right.
Chirp. Or now Blue.
I don't mean to be pedantic, but you made him a QuickTime movie, but what did you do your design work in?
Just the typical Adobe tools, nothing too special, just, Photoshop, Illustrator, After Effects.
And then how did you do the animation part?
After Effects and all those tools combined.
We'd like to say those opening animations, where you're adjusting a chrome or, some amazing DirectX-based, mesh deformation, but that's just not the case. I think the story is still a little bit the same, and I think that as Flash as in the past, which is it's sort of a by any means necessary. So in many cases,
right.
We don't have a problem relying on image sequences or movies or other types of assets. I know there's a big push
right.
to kind of get everything in XAML, and I think a lot of those that makes sense certainly in terms of if you're going to be resizing a lot of content. But, in the case of this application where we're kind of just shooting after a kind of a small footprint, small gadget-like application, we went ahead and canned some of those sequences.
I went and did a bunch of work recently with a buddy of mine on an application for a large company, and I blogged a little bit about it. And one of the things that people kind of read me the riot act about was that I used a lot of transparent PNGs as resources. And I found that the combination of XAML and declarative animations and those transparent PNGs gave me a lot more flexibility that it would have been very difficult to do in WinForms. Are you guys sinning as I did with transparent PNGs and stuff?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. We're not purists. We use what we need to use to get the job done to get the best fidelity that we want. So yeah, we have no problem using ping sequences or XAML. It's whatever happens to work best for the fidelity we need. And it actually might be helpful to point out that we sort of have built up our own internal library to support some of the fidelity that we have in Blue. So if we do want to use a ping sequence, we have a pretty robust class that's in the library that will allow us to really quickly and easily add in as many ping sequences as we want, and control timing and in frame rate, and whether it's reverse or forward and looping, things like that. We have a layout engine in there that can handle really fluid, adding items to a layout really fluidly where everything animates in correctly. You can dynamically adjust the orientation or even the layout schema from say stack panel to grid to fan view. And then on top of that, it's completely virtualized, and that actually affords us a lot of a lot of efficiencies, because then we can actually take that library and just drop it into, like say, drama, and then you have drama really quickly, because you can basically just hook your data source up to this layout engine, or hook your new pings up into a new instance of the image sequence, and you're good to go.
So how far off of the classic, the standard WPF way of doing things do you think you guys are? I mean, how many different libraries did you have to write because you felt that WPF was missing something and didn't do something, versus you just wanted to write libraries to support a certain style?
The framework is beautiful. The WPF framework is just excellent, because at the same time it gives you such a great base amount of functionality, but it's so easy to build on top of it to get to that next level if you require a higher degree of control and fidelity over what it is that you want. So for us, when we code a class in the library, we definitely want it to follow the model laid out by the framework. So Our layout panel, follows the virtualization method, can plug into a list box as an items panel source, just like the other panel should. Takes place in an observable. You can assign its item source an observable collection, and you're good to go. One thing that's kind of interesting is that we wrote this, way before Win 7, so way before there was any concept of the touch drivers there, the touch framework that's provided in the upcoming Win 7. So we kind of had to go in and roll that in ourselves. We kind of had to split away from the standard list box control that goes subclasses from the selector, because we needed to be able to support direct manipulation and physics and sort of overshooting the window, things like that. So we kind of had to roll that our own because we just didn't have anything else to go off of. But that shows you how powerful the framework is, because if you take the time to dig in there and understand what's going on, you can actually achieve some really nice results.
Did you get stuck in any places where it was just like, it looks like WPF's just flat not going to do this?
Actually no. Everything that I've been able to dream up, I've been able to accomplish with the framework.
Yeah.
I think. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, I think we the way we go into every project is assuming that it can probably be done, and then we'll kind of work backwards. But, for sure, in terms of, how we use the framework, I don't think it's that, I don't think it's that off the grid different than most people. I think if anything, we're just leveraging the framework. I mean, Microsoft always had this idea of lookless controls, and it's very easy to extend, common behaviors and create new controls or user controls. And certainly in terms of bitmap effects, and some of the new sort of motion blurs and what have you, we definitely rely on those. But, when we come to a place where we want to do something a little more adventurous, say adjust the chrome of the application, then I think, we're left to rely on other forms of magic.
Okay, well, I want to get back to the technical details of that splash screen that I asked about earlier, but before I get into that, I want to ask another technical question. You pick up this list box with your mouse and you can throw it. You can pick it up, you can scroll up and down, and I can grab it, and then I can toss it, and it'll float for a little while before it kind of slows down. One of the things that I thought was really subtle and that I appreciated was, and I appreciate it because I know that someone put work into it as opposed to appreciating it because it happened automatically, is that if you get all the way to the top of your list of tweets and you pick it up and you start dragging down, the list pulls down a little bit, but it pulls down slower. It's kind of trying to imply, sorry dude, that's as far as you can go. But if you keep yanking on it, the application itself starts to pull down as if it's like, really, man, you can't go any farther. I'm pulling as far as I can. And then you let go and then it bounces back. Somebody cared about that. How in the world did you pull that off? Explain to me the technical background about that particular thing, please.
So that's, we kind of one-upped Windows 7 in that arena, I think. It's because we don't have to wait on the OS to come out with touch to show that off. We can sort of come in through the back door and get it done quicker. But it's functionality that's built into the layout engine that's in our library. And there's sort of a standard model that the panel rendering engine uses, which is, a range override and a measure override. And you sort of use this animation ticker to dynamically go between states. So originally,
can you explain to the listeners? They may not necessarily know what a tween is.
Between the states of, for instance, let's say you have a stack panel where things are stacked horizontally, and you go to a grid view. Standard expectation is that if you change the view, that all of a sudden everything just sort of magically snaps into the new place, right? The elements in the list just magically change location. The idea is that's very jarring for the user. You want to provide some context. So it would be nice if they animated from a horizontal layout to a grid layout. So that would be handling that tween of going from one layout to another is what I'm referring to when I say tween.
Right. So in between is what that's for. And that's one of the things that animators used to do.
Right.
Like if you go to Disney and you've got an animator who is someone who animates by hand,
Correct.
You've got your professional animator who draws the keyframe where maybe Mickey Mouse has his arm down, and then the next keyframe he has his hand up rather.
Right.
He has his hand down, his hand up. He draws those two keyframes, and then he passes it off to some intern, some guy he has hidden in the basement. And that guy writes all of the tweens.
Right.
He says, get Mickey's hand to move from here to there.
Right.
Work it out. So you're basically saying you've written a library that figures tweens out within WPF or uses the existing animation libraries to do that?
Yeah. Well, in this case, the intern that's sitting in the basement would just be math. It's using it's based on the same math that the classic Robert Pinner equations, from Flash use. So that
right.
You basically just say, this is where my item is right now, and this is where it should be X amount of time from now, and apply some sort of mathematical equation to get them there. And that's really what it all boils down to. Anything from changing the orientation of the items to dragging the items beyond their extent, and then slowly moving the window itself.
But I was dragging the list box inside the window, and the entire application, the outer window, kind of figured that out and decided to move along too. Were you throwing events up to that window for him to listen to?
No, that's actually all built into the layout panel itself. You can.
Oh, the layout panel. So this was a bubbled event. The layout panel knew that it was being pulled too far.
Right, and internally for direct manipulation, the layout engine, the panel itself is what's receiving those events. So it's sort of like the master controller, and if it knows that it needs to move the window, it's easy enough in WPF to walk the visual tree or to walk the logical tree, get a reference to the window, and offset it based on some sort of mathematical equation. And we definitely want, like you said, we really think long and hard about these things. So we thought it would be cool if initially the list sort of starts resisting you, but then eventually the window itself starts resisting you at the same time. We thought that would be really nice. So we wrote it.
Yeah, it's a pretty slick. It's just one more layer of polish. I think it's pretty cool. Now, help me understand what we talked about at the very beginning of the show when I was asking about this opening animation. I mean, is it just a movie, or what's going on there?
It's a series of let's say sequences laid over each other.
Okay.
So yeah,
you're saying that it's a bunch of PNGs, or you guys call them pings,
right,
that are just laid over. So it's a poor man's movie.
Well, yeah, like Hal alluded to, he built out this reference animation for us to show what his ideal was for this startup and shutdown. So I said, okay, yeah, let's do this. Ideally, bake me out a sequence of the window itself, and then bake me out a sequence of the bluebird, coming in with the particle effects, and then I will use our library to load up these sequences and then control them. Our image sequence class happens to it counts its frames and fires events on those frames so that you can sort of time things correctly, so that you can overlay animations based on events. So I knew that at a certain frame of the window growing, I could fire off the bird animation. And then when the bird animation completes, I know that I can fade in the rest of the UI elements. So yeah, that's the way that we achieve all of the nice, smooth transitions from one state to the next. So
this is because you can't do transparent movies. Because you keep saying image sequence, and I keep thinking movie, and I'm thinking, is there a transparent AVI or transparent QuickTime or some kind of transparent thing? And this animation's about 3 seconds long. What is that, 50 or 60 PNGs?
Yeah, it's a pretty large scene sequence, and we've definitely been dinged for our memory footprint at one time. And we've been working with some guys from Microsoft to, sort of streamline that. And one of the guys actually went in and made an AVI for us, and then used map effects to sort of allergy out the unwanted portions to make a transparent movie, which is a great idea. We've been a little resistant to force everyone to upgrade that for stack one of the .NET 3.5 framework, though, just for because it tends to take a really long time to implement that update.
Right.
So we've kind of just
Right, because my memory usage right now on this particular thing is 160 megs.
Yeah.
And you're saying that ping sequence, I don't know if I can get used to saying ping. You know, the whole GIF controversy of the early 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't respect people who say GIF. Just want to let sure that the listeners know that if they say GIF, then I don't want their business.
Well, it's also sort of like, you know, the whole Quake thing where you either get someone or get someone.
So you're saying that some chunk of that is that sequence of images that may not have been let go of.
Right. Like Doug said, you know, we released this as a lab. We weren't really concerned about memory footprint or anything like that. But once we found out that people actually wanted to use this product as a product and not just a lab, then,
people actually wanted to use the Twitter client that you made.
Right. Well, you know, it was a lab. We weren't expecting people to just want to adopt it and use it on a regular basis. But now that we see that it's viable, we're definitely going back and trying to address some of these issues. So in the build that I'm working on now, once that sequence gets garbage collected, it reclaims or frees up a whole lot of memory. It seems to vary based on computer and based on hardware and video drivers. I know on Hal's machine, Blue runs at 30 megs, at a 30 meg clip very consistently. On my machine, when it starts up, it's about 120 megs, but then once the garbage collection kicks in, it drops down to about 70 or 80. We have a couple other guys who are using it, and it seems to vary anywhere between 80 megs to 60 megs.
I think it has something to do with video cards because I'm running at a 220 meg working set right now.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, one of the things that people first notice when they look at it, not only is that it's pretty, but it doesn't resize.
Yeah.
How much of a problem is that going to be with the way that you've laid things out using, I'm using a lot of these PNGs. And when I did my application, people said, well, this isn't going to scale. It won't look good at at large fonts. The more rasters that you use and the fewer vectors, the more you're going to paint yourself in the corner. Is there a problem with that, with the resizing, or is that not related?
Well, we in a future rev, we're definitely going to add in vertical resizing. And that's not an issue with raster images. You can do a 9 grid, or you can chop the images up so that you can make them scalable. So we are going to make the app vertically sizable, and making it horizontally and vertically sizable will introduce problems. And again, since we were going for a very specific look, we had never really planned to make the app sizable. But again, since people want to use it on a regular basis, we definitely want to afford some of that functionality in there.
Yeah. I'm looking at it I'm looking at my running instance of Blue next to my running instance of TweetDeck, and I'm wishing I could make multiple columns in Blue, and I think you could dethrone TweetDeck as the power user, or the power Twitter user's client of choice.
Yeah.
If you look to them for your inspiration.
Yeah, TweetDeck has its place, but in the experience that we were trying to convey, or our Twitter experience, or at least my own, I'm not going to speak for the guys, Twitter to me is more like an ambient stream of my friends just kind of saying, hey, check this out. So, I don't need to have just a console of just I need to keep track of all my tweets at all times, and here's this. It's like, no. See, because that's more stress.
I see. So Blue is not for the uptight, retentive tweeter like myself.
Well, it definitely has an audience in the sense that, it's just an ambient experience. It was on your desktop, and it does its thing. It grabs tweet, and then if you happen to look at it, the blue bird might flap its wings for you. So,
give me some, do you have any stories or anything crazy that you had to deal with? Any debugging issues? You said that you're working on the working set right now, but if you run into anything that really kind of kicked your ass for a couple hours or a couple of days and then figured it out and kind of had that slap the forehead moment when you were working with the .NET and WPF?
I think right now definitely the thing that's been most surprising is the huge variation in the working set based on just using ping sequences. That's the thing that's right now is proving to be the hardest to get a handle around, just because different hardware configurations seem to affect it so greatly. The Twitter client itself is really, it's a relatively simple model, so I didn't really encounter too many issues there, other than just the standard, stupid smack yourself in the forehead mistakes like forgetting a semicolon every now and then, or forgetting to URL encode my URL before I sent it off to the tiny URL service, which actually made a complete idiot of myself and actually contacted the guys at tiny URL saying, look, for some reason this isn't parsing right. And he emailed me back saying, you need to URL encode your stuff before you send it to us. And I just was like, oh, man, I'm such an idiot.
Oh, ouch. You've burnt your bridges with those guys. They'll never respect you again. I hate it when I do stuff like that.
Yeah, but other than that, there weren't really too many hurdles. The hurdles came in, writing the libraries really, and just trying to get in and figure out how virtualization is supposed to work. Things like that were the real tough nuts to crack.
I think one other thing, which is probably not completely related, but certainly something we've run into with our clients, and there's a reason when you go to the site, it says the Vista Twitter client, even though if you had 3.5, SP1, and XP, you should be able to run Blue. But the main problem being that the install times and some of the installation experience around installing 3.5 SP1 on, say, XP, where the installer seems to just kind of hang at 40% and whatnot. I think that's also been kind of a major sort of hurdle, not so much on this project, but certainly on other projects.
Now you guys know that the 3.5 SP1 framework is rolling out on Windows Update now, so soon everyone who's got Update will start to see Windows 3.5 SP1 just show up on their machine, so that should make your installation experience a lot better.
Yeah, definitely.
God, I was kind of hoping you'd have some horrid story about how WPF just kicked your ass or something. It didn't work.
Once you spend a few years with the framework, you realize it's really it's pretty well designed. It's really nicely flexible, and it's like any tool. You got to have a hand that touches the tool to use it and to think for it.
Yeah.
But you spend some time with it, and you realize it's actually WPF is really pretty nice. It's so incredibly easy to do really high fidelity animations and plug in the stuff that you know from your Flash days and plug in the stuff that you know from your 3D days. So,
well, see, now you've ruined my plan for the talk here. I try to make the show not a Microsoft love fest. I don't want it to be like this big sycophant thing where we all sit around and talk about how awesome stuff is. So I was hoping you were going to have some kind of, horrific thing where you wasted a week because you were fighting with something.
We've dinged it on, sort of the whole SP1 thing and I think the high working set. I don't personally think that I'm doing anything ridiculously crazy in my code to cause it to jump up to 200 megs. And when you can see it run 200 megs on one machine and then 30 megs on another, that's a little frustrating. Yeah. But these are largely things that seem to be really inside the guts of the framework itself.
Yeah, I think it has something to do. I mean, I'm guessing here. I think it probably has something to do with texture memory and what kind of video card you have, and whether or not the renderer can get these things out into the video card and out of memory. But the thing to do would be to just go into Task Manager, right-click on blue.exe, and say create dump, and go looking around in memory and see what's there. There's lots of .NET memory visualizers that'll let you just take a snapshot of exactly what's on the heap and poke around, and you'll see what they are. It would take no time. We should do a show on that. We should just take apart this thing at a runtime. If you give me the symbols, I might do it right now. Cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. I think that Blue's got a lot of potential, and I think that it'd even be really interesting to see if you could port it to Silverlight and how much trouble you would have to see how different WPF is versus Silverlight. And most people say if you want to learn XAML and WPF, they say learn Silverlight first, and then go up to WPF because you have more power. You have a superset of XAML. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if someone tried to port from a big application like this into something on the web.
Yeah, we don't have any immediate plans to do that, but I think right now we're focused on actually just adding more features that people want in Blue, such as reply view and making it resizable, things like that, search functionality. But yeah, that might be an interesting experience or experiment.
Have you guys thought about how you're going to update it? Because I assume if it becomes a popular thing and most Twitter clients update, a couple times a month, are you going to have people run the setup program again? Are you going to switch it to click once?
No, it's actually deployed as click once right now. So anytime you start up Blue, if there's an update, it should pull it down for you. As a matter of fact, we just released the update that had the tiny URL integration, and we've got another update that we're going to push out fairly soon, maybe at the end of the week, that will be mainly bug fixes, and maybe addressing the smaller memory footprint. But yeah, any updates to Blue should come down to you automatically.
Now, I didn't notice it at all. You're doing custom progress, and you're bringing the updates down in the background.
Yeah, exactly. In Visual Studio, you can go in there and specify, how you want your Click Once updates to happen. So
cool. That's great. I'm really surprised. It doesn't smell like a Click Once application.
Oh, nice. That's good to hear.
I mean that as a compliment. I have a little tiny application that's not nearly as sophisticated called Baby Smash that I go back and forth about how I want it to behave as a Click Once client. And this is interesting. Are you guys planning on starting a blog and starting to spread some of this information, or are you going to keep all this good stuff secret?
That's a good question. We have a couple of Twitter feeds right now that speak specifically to the application. Yeah, I think in the future, I think we're always tending to do some sort of internal exploration around touch, or whether it be WPF clients or whatnot. And I think, maybe in the future, I think it would be fun to kind of show, we have thought about just kind of showing the process over time. Like a lot of people see the end result, but they don't necessarily see, all the iterations and all the work that goes in it from, proof of concept all the way through to, something where you can actually click and download the application. And I think we have thought about, showing more of that process online in some form.
Yeah. And I think there's been some talk of maybe us cooking up some code to show off at Mix as well. So
yeah, I think that when people suffer and they build libraries and they, at some point you decide whether that's intellectual property and you want to keep that and that's a thing that keeps your business going, or whether you want to spread the love and not make that library a part of your kind of internal IP. And I think you can find a balance. And yeah, I'd love to show some of the stuff that you're doing at Mix. So this has been cool. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us.
All right, this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and I'll see you again next week.